Leora arrived home on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of quiet hour when the city feels paused. Her suitcase rolled softly across the tiled floor as she stepped into the apartment she shared with Julian. The space still smelled faintly like his cologne, clean and understated. She liked that about him. Julian never tried too hard. She kicked off her low heels and hung her blazer carefully. Structured tailoring, silk blouse beneath, the kind of outfit that carried authority without announcing it. The work trip had been long, meetings stacked on meetings, but she felt good, accomplished, grounded. Julian stepped out of the kitchen with a smile that reached his eyes. "You're back," he said, pulling her into a hug. She melted into it easily, familiar, safe. Tabitha followed seconds later, waving from the couch like she belonged there. "Finally," Tabitha said. "I was starting to think you loved that job more than us." Leora laughed. Of course, Tabitha was here. She always was. They had been inseparable since college, best friends in the way people envied and never questioned. When Leora started dating Julian, it felt natural to include her. Why wouldn't she? Love expanded, it didn't replace, at least that's what Leora believed. Dinner was easy. Too easy. Tabitha wore a cropped leather jacket over a soft dress, curls falling effortlessly around her face. She looked good. She always did. Julian noticed, but Leora didn't think anything of it. People noticed beautiful things. They sat around the table, plates clinking, conversation flowing. Until it didn't. Julian laughed at something Tabitha said, a quick laugh that came with a look Leora didn't recognize. "You remember that night," Tabitha said, smiling at Julian, "when you completely ruined the game?" Julian shook his head, grinning. "You promised never to bring that up again." Leora paused, fork mid-air. "What night?" she asked lightly. They both looked at her then, just for a second. Tabitha waved it off. "Oh, nothing, just some silly thing." Julian nodded too quickly. "Yeah, not important." Leora smiled and continued eating, but something had shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Later that evening, they sat on the couch. Leora curled into Julian's side, instinctively reaching for his hand. He squeezed back, but his attention drifted. Tabitha was telling a story now, animated, hands moving as she spoke. And then he says, "You can't be serious," she said, mimicking the voice. Julian laughed again. Harder this time. "That was wild," he said. "I still can't believe that happened." Leora waited. "And?" she prompted gently. They both turned to her again. "Oh," Tabitha said, blinking. "You weren't there for that part." Something about the way she said it landed wrong. Leora laughed softly. Clearly. But inside she felt like she was pressing her face against glass, watching something unfold without her. She told herself it was nothing, a week away. Of course things happened without her. Still, she shifted slightly, adjusting her blouse, trying to reclaim her space without making it obvious. The next day they met for brunch, their usual spot. White tables spilling onto the sidewalk, sunlight bouncing off glassware. Leora wore a silk blouse tucked into tailored trousers, hair pulled back cleanly. Effortless elegance. She felt like herself again. Tabitha arrived late, breathless, wearing a playful mini dress and sneakers, her jacket slung casually over one shoulder. Julian stood when she arrived. Leora noticed. "Sorry," Tabitha said, sliding into her seat. "Traffic was crazy," Julian smiled. "Worth the wait." It was said casually. Probably meant nothing, but Leora's chest tightened anyway. As they ate, the inside jokes returned. Quiet laughs, shared glances, moments that didn't include her. She tried, asked questions, leaned in. Each time the conversation adjusted slightly, like a door closing gently before she could step through. That evening, Leora lay awake beside Julian. He slept easily, arm draped across her waist. She stared at the ceiling, replaying moments she wished she could forget noticing. She felt guilty for even thinking it. This was Tabitha, her best friend, the one who had held her hair back during heartbreaks, The one who knew her fears, her history, her softness. And Julian was hers. Solid. Steady. People didn't just betray you out of nowhere, they didn't rewrite years of trust in a week. She rolled onto her side, pressing closer to him. This was nothing, she told herself, just noise in her head. A few days later, Leora came home early. She heard laughter before she opened the door. Julian's. Tabitha's. She paused, hand still on the handle, listening. "You're terrible," Tabitha said between laughs. "You love it," Julian replied. The door opened. They both looked up. Tabitha straightened first. Julian followed. "Oh," Tabitha said, surprised. "You're home already?" Leora smiled. "Meeting got cancelled," Julian nodded. "Lucky." But something in his tone felt distant. Tabitha grabbed her bag quickly. "I should go." She kissed Leora's cheek a touch too quick and brushed past Julian without looking at him. Leora stood there watching her leave. Later that night, Leora sat alone in the kitchen. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was hurt. Not because she had proof of anything. She didn't. But because for the first time, she felt like she had returned to her own life and found parts of it rearranged without her permission. She stared at her untouched tea. Trust doesn't disappear all at once. It loosens first. And Leora felt it loosen. Leora decided not to retreat. If something felt off, the answer wasn't distance. It was presence. Friday evening, she suggested dinner out. Not just her and Julian. Tabitha too. Like before. Like always. They met at a new rooftop spot downtown. Warm lighting, soft music, city air drifting between tables. Leora dressed intentionally. A fitted midi dress in a muted tone, heels low but elegant. Confident, composed, herself. Tabitha arrived glowing. A little too polished for a casual dinner. Sleek trousers, cropped jacket, hair styled with care. She hugged Leora tightly. "You look good," Tabitha said. "So do you," Leora replied, meaning it. Julian joined moments later, neutral as ever. Clean lines, understated watch, that calm presence Leora had fallen for. For a moment it felt normal again. That hope didn't last long. They ordered drinks. Conversation flowed easily at first. Work, plans, harmless stories. Then Julian leaned toward Tabitha. "You never told her about that," he said, smiling. Tabitha laughed. "I forgot." Leora smiled too, waiting. "About what?" she asked. They both hesitated. "Not long. Just enough." "Oh," Julian said, "just something random." Tabitha nodded quickly. "Yeah, not important." Leora's smile held, but something inside her sank. It wasn't the secret. It was the instinct, the way they moved together before remembering her. As the night went on, Julian checked his phone less when Leora spoke, more when Tabitha did. He remembered her preferences, her comments, her jokes. Leora felt herself leaning forward, unconsciously competing for space she never had to fight for before. At the bar, waiting for drinks. Leora stood between them. Tabitha leaned closer to Julian to speak over the music. Her hand rested briefly on his arm. Not lingering, just long enough to be familiar. Julian didn't move away. Leora adjusted her posture, smoothing her dress, reminding herself she didn't need to try. She wasn't threatened. That was ridiculous. Still, she felt like she was watching someone else step into a role she hadn't vacated. When the drinks came, Julian handed Tabitha hers first. He didn't notice. Leora did. On the way home, Leora said nothing. Julian talked about the food, about how nice it was to all hang out again. She nodded, responding when appropriate. Later that night, she called Tabitha. "I just wanted to check in," Leora said casually. "You've seemed a little distant." Tabitha laughed softly. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" "Leora," Tabitha said gently, "you just got back from a trip. Things feel different when routines change. That's all." Leora wanted to believe her. She did believe her. That was the problem. The following week, the exclusions became quieter. Plans made without her. Conversations resumed mid-thought. Text threads she wasn't part of. Nothing dramatic. Nothing she could point to and say, "This is it." Just the steady feeling of arriving late to moments that used to be hers. One afternoon, she overheard Julian on the phone. "I'll tell her later," he said. He noticed her standing there and smiled. "Hey." "Hey," she replied. He never explained what he'd meant. She didn't ask. Saturday afternoon, Leora suggested shopping. Just her and Tabitha. Like old times. They walked through a boutique-lined street, sun reflecting off glass displays. Leora tried to relax, to reconnect. Inside a store, Tabitha held up a dress. "Julian would like this," she said without thinking. The words landed hard. Silence stretched between them. "I mean," Tabitha added quickly, laughing, "it's his style." Leora smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Something had crossed a line. Not betrayal, not yet, but ownership. That night, Leora sat alone on the edge of the bed. Julian was late, said he got caught up. She didn't ask where. For the first time, she didn't feel like she belonged fully in her own relationship. Not because she had lost him, but because she was slowly being edited out. And what hurt most was that she was still trying to protect the very people doing it. Leora didn't plan the confrontation. It came out of exhaustion, not anger. They were in the kitchen. Late evening, Julian leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone, while she rinsed a glass at the sink. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Julian looked up. "Sure." She dried her hands slowly, buying herself a second. "When did Tabitha become the funniest person you know?" He smiled automatically, then paused. "What?" "You laugh at everything she says now," Leora continued, calm but direct. "Even things you don't hear properly." Julian shrugged. "She's always been funny." Leora shook her head. "No, she hasn't. This is new." The room went quiet. Julian exhaled and smiled again, this time slower. "You're reading too much into it." "I might be," Leora said, "but it feels different." "How?" "You lean toward her when she talks. You remember things she says and forget things I tell you. You light up around her." Julian laughed softly, not unkindly. "She's your best friend. What's the issue?" Leora held his gaze. "The issue is that I feel like I'm watching you fall into a rhythm with someone else." Julian looked away. That was the first crack. "Nothing is happening," Julian said quickly. Too quickly. "You trust Tabitha, don't you?" The question landed heavier than he intended. "Yes," Leora said. "That's why I'm asking you, not her." Julian rubbed the back of his neck. "You're just adjusting. You were gone for a week." "A week doesn't rewrite people." He didn't answer that. Instead, he reached for his phone. "She texted earlier," he said casually. "Just something funny." Leora didn't respond. Something about the ease of the mention unsettled her. Later that night, Julian showered. His phone buzzed on the counter. Leora wasn't snooping. It was right there. A preview flashed on the screen. "Tabitha. You still owe me for last time." Leora stared at the words. Last time. She didn't open the message. She didn't touch the phone. But something in her chest shifted permanently. When Julian returned, she was sitting at the table. "Did you and Tabitha hang out while I was away?" she asked. Julian stopped. "What?" "Just the two of you." A pause. "Once," he said. "Maybe twice." She didn't want to be alone. Leora nodded slowly. "You didn't think to tell me." "I didn't think it mattered." That was when the trust cracked audibly. The next night was movie night. Routine, familiar, or it was supposed to be. Julian's phone kept buzzing. "Take the call already," Leora said as it kept distracting them from the movie. Julian stepped out to take a call. Leora sat still for a moment. She got tempted to snoop. Then she reached for his jacket. Inside the pocket was a folded receipt, paint and sip studio, 2 wines, 2 desserts. The date was unmistakable. A weekday afternoon. When she was out of town. Her hands didn't shake. She folded the receipt carefully and placed it back exactly where it had been. When Julian returned, she smiled. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "All good." The lie tasted bitter. 2 days later, an anonymous message arrived. No greeting, no explanation, just a photo. Tabitha standing close to Julian, feeding him dessert, both of them laughing, faces angled toward each other in a way that erased all doubt. This wasn't friendliness. This was intimacy. Leora stared at the image until the room felt quiet enough to hear her own breathing. She deleted it immediately and blocked the number. She didn't need more. That night, Leora sat alone in the dark. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She felt something colder and clearer than pain. The story she had been protecting was over, and now she would decide how it ended.